Welcome to the Retirement Resource Show, the place to come to live a retirement that is meaningful, fulfilling, and fun. We believe this phase of your life is the best time of your life. It's up to you, and we've got the show to get you there. Here's your host, Beau Henderson.
Welcome to the Retirement Resource Show. Welcome back, guys. Excited today. Someone whose work has had a big impact on my life and is going to shoot us straight about, if you've been around me long, I don't like to be there's not the Pollyanna that I'll talk to people and things are, hey, there's no problems. There's no real issues out there. No, I don't think that. Now, at the other extreme, I also don't think we need to be jumping off a cliff today because everything's go get in our bunkers. But usually the truth is somewhere in between. But I can promise you this, our guest today is going to shoot us straight on some issues we are really facing in this country and some things we can do about it. That's our good friend, David McKnight. But before we get to that, hey, I'm excited to be here today, Amy.
Oh my gosh, this is just really fun. We've been looking forward to this. Getting to hear from David today is really a treat. We've both met him before and it's a wow moment. So you'll definitely want to watch this entire show. But Beau, I love that we kick off this with current events. We really like to help this be a show that's interactive and up to date. And right now we know that the last 2 years has had tremendous volatility. We've had a pandemic. We've got what's going over in Ukraine and with Russia right now. What can people do to protect their investments at this stage when people are starting to get nervous?
Yeah, we've been seeing the volatility, and what the volatility, when we run into examples of volatility or problems that come from that, it always drives me back to we need to focus on a properly structured retirement strategy. And the reason I say that is that a strategy that's structured properly, it's going to work whether the market's going up or down. And we've talked about that a lot. If the structure of that, if we'll mind our timeline, so to speak, and what I mean by that is if I have income needs for this next market cycle or this next 5 to 10 years, if I'm positioned right so that money's not going to drop 5, 10, 20, 30% in a volatile market, I'm just fine. I can take my paycheck and it's not taking it at a loss. And the pieces of money that I do have exposed that have 10, 15 years plus to outride the volatility, you don't lose money in volatility unless you take a distribution. And we're talking specifically about retirement. That's where I see most mistakes made. People get to retirement with a lot of money in a big 401k or maybe some IRAs, and they have one big bucket of money doing a plan. And when it comes time to take that $3,000, $4,000 a month I need to pay my paycheck or to pay my bills, if the market's down 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, it has a devastating effect on how long my money will last. Right. So whenever we feel volatility and people get scared because there's a lot of fear that we're hearing in all the topics, right? You had pandemic, war, markets going up and down. I say let's mind our strategy, because what I find is a lot of times people will be doing a lot of things worrying about things outside of their control, right? What can I do about the war? Not a whole lot. What can I do about the pandemic? Not a lot. But have I done everything I can do to properly position my strategy so that it works mathematically with some certainty, not luck, whether the market's up or down? So I guess that's my message for everybody as we're coming through. The news can be really fear-inducing, and sometimes that can actually push us into action and sometimes the wrong action. So that's my message for when you see volatility, let's mind our strategy, and that'll tell us exactly what we need to do.
Wow. That's powerful.
Wow, can you tell that's a soapbox, right?
Yes, but it's so powerful and it's so true. And most people don't take the time maybe to have the right advisors or to get that right information. Everybody's just Googling everything. And so, Beau, you eat, sleep, and breathe this. So for you to be able to give just such sound, great guidance, that's why we have this show. That's why we're so thankful we have you. So that was incredible. Thank you. There you have it.
The only thing scarier right now than market volatility is I think what we're about to queue up with our guest today, taxes scares me even worse. So I'll let you go with it from there, Amy.
Well, it is my privilege to introduce David. First, I want everybody to understand just how amazing he is, what he's accomplished, and why it's so special that we get to meet with him here today. So I'm going to read this for you guys. David McKnight graduated from Brigham University with honors in 1997. Over the past 23 years, David has helped put thousands of Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket. He has made frequent appearances in Forbes, USA Today, New York Times, Fox Business, CBS Radio, Bloomberg Radio, Huffington Post, Reuters, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, NASDAQ, Investors, Business Daily, and numerous other national publications. His best-selling book, The Power of Xero, has sold over 350,000 copies,
Wow.
and the updated and revised version was published by Penguin Random House. When it was launched in September of 2018, it finished the week as the #2 most sold business book in the world. For 2 consecutive years, Forbes magazine has ranked The Power of Xero as the top 10 financial resource in the country, and we have him here with us. This book was recently made into a full-length documentary filmed entitled The Power of Xero. The tax train is coming. When his follow-up book, Tax-Free Income for Life, launched in November of 2020, it finished the week as the #3 top-selling business book in the world. And he and his wife, Felice, have 7 children. And we are so grateful to have him with us today. So that being said, let's not waste any more time. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me, guys.
David, welcome to the show. Amy, will you pull up that screen that we had got before the show? I don't think it's going to be anything new to David. All right, David, I think I've seen you show this. So what I promised and what I love about your work, David, is you're educating. You're educating the public and raising the financial IQ with sharing this in a no-nonsense way. So let's just talk about it. I'm going to let you take it. What's the problem here?
Well, the problem is that our country has promised way more than it can afford to pay. We look at this debt clock here. It says $30 trillion. It's a 3 and a 0 followed by 12 zeros. So we scream past $30 trillion. I wish I could say that the end was in sight. But the $30 trillion isn't even really the real number. Some experts say that the real number is 125 trillion, what you call off the books obligations, things that the federal government doesn't even by law have to report that every other country in the world does. There's a very famous economist by the name of Dr. Larry Kotlikoff out of Boston University, foremost expert in the world on what we call fiscal gap accounting. What he does is he projects out over the next 75 years, everything that we promised to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt. And he projects out over that same time period, everything that we can afford to pay under today's tax rates. And he says, look, if there's a difference between those two numbers, then your country has a fiscal gap, and that's its true national debt. He says the true national debt in the United States is not 30 trillion. It's not even 125 trillion. It's much closer to $239 trillion. In other words, what does that mean? That means that we would have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today, earning treasury rates to be able to deliver on everything that we promised that we can't afford to pay. And so the question is, for a retiring generation of baby boomers who have saved the lion's share of their retirement savings in tax-deferred vehicles like 401ks and IRAs. In other words, they've got a deduction on the front end. They postpone the payment of those taxes till some point much further down the road. When they take those dollars out, at what rate are they going to be taxed? Well, we're marching into a future where all of the experts are saying that tax rates have to double, given the fiscal commitments that we have as a country. So how much of that hard-earned retirement savings are Americans going to be able to keep? Well, if it's stuck in 401ks and IRAs and they leave it there, not very much. And so the question is, if you read the handwriting on the wall, you're looking at these numbers and it's motivating you, it's creating a sense of urgency, what should you do about it? And I get the feeling, Beau, that's what we're going to be talking about today.
It is. And, that was the great lie. When I came into financial services 24 years ago, the way I was taught to do that business was you went in to talk to people putting money in their 401k plans. And you said, you should save money now because when you retire, you're going to be retiring at a lower tax bracket. And it makes a lot of financial sense to do that. And what we've run into is the exact opposite is actually what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that made a lot of sense back in the 1970s when tax, the highest marginal tax bracket was 70%. Sure, you were going to get a deduction at that high rate and then take it out at a lower rate somewhere down the road. But, convention's been turned on its ear. We're now at a period in time when tax rates are historically low. They haven't been this low in 80 years. With a small exception in the early 90s, hasn't really been this low. And every expert that I've read, it used to be that some people said, that maybe they won't raise taxes, they'll print their way out of it. Now every single expert has come over onto into my camp and said, look, yeah, we recognize tax rates have to rise dramatically in the next 10 years or we go bankrupt as a country. And so we're at historically low tax rates. We know when tax rates are going to go up, January 1st, 2026, which means we've got 4 years during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates to maybe preemptively pay the taxes on those IRAs and 401ks, get them into tax-free investments so that by the time tax rates rise over time, we've done all the heavy lifting. We can then take that money out tax-free.
And I want to step back, David, for just a minute so that people really pull this together. A lot of times what I hear is, yes, there's a general consensus that tax rates will go up or taxes will be higher. But guy, did you hear David say that the consensus actually is they need to double? They need to double. And what's that going to do when you start distributing or taking assets out of these accounts? And a lot of times, David, people look at me funny because I call that pre-tax money like dirty money or ugly money because I want to get rid of it. So, but what is it? What can we do? So we have 2026. What's happening there, right? Is the current tax rates are sunsetting.
Yeah, that's right. So 2026, we know that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 basically put taxes on sale. In my book, The Power of Xero, Chapter 6, I call the tax sale of a lifetime. So we know that we know that tax sale has an expiration date. It was only an 8-year deal. They got it through under budget reconciliation, which means it has a sunset clause, which means that January 1st, 2026, it's going to revert back to what it was in 2017, which means that we now have a 4-year window of opportunity within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And guess what? Every year that goes by where we fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2026 when we could be forced to pay the highest tax rates we're likely to see in our lifetime. And so really, we should be really taking advantage of each and every one of the next 4 years to be, if it makes sense mathematically, you got to really look at the numbers. What's your tax bracket today versus where it could be down the road, and potentially start repositioning money from your IRAs and 401ks into the tax-free bucket. There's a whole bevy of true tax-free investments that I talk about on the Power of Xero. We can talk about here today, but we need to be growing our dollars in tax-free accounts. As Ed Slott likes to say, he says your 401ks and IRAs are infested with taxes. So we want to divorce the IRS. We want to pay the taxes preemptively before the IRS requires it of us. Let's do it at historically low tax rates so that by the time tax rates rise dramatically over time, we've done all the heavy lifting. We can then take that money out tax-free.
I love it. So we really are establishing, hey, the problem's real. It's here. There is a window of opportunity. That's great. But would you be open to going into some detail for the consumer or the retiree or the pre-retiree saying, hey, what do I do? How do I even go about figuring out how to transition these assets? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so most people that walk into my office every day are currently in the 22% tax bracket or the 24% tax bracket. That's really the sweet spot for this type of planning. If you're in the 37% tax bracket and maybe you live in a state where you have really high taxes, and so maybe you don't want to forego a 45% tax deduction today because you think you'll be in a lower tax bracket down the road. I get that. I'm not going to sort of force my paradigm on you. But if you're in the 22 or 24% tax bracket, which most of your listeners probably are, why not convert up to the top of your 22% tax bracket, which is, on the order of about $170,000. Convert to the top of the 170% tax bracket. Sorry, convert to the top of the 22% tax bracket. And by the way, Beau, the 24% tax bracket is only 2% higher, but it allows you to convert an extra $150,000 or so. So why not take advantage of the 24% tax bracket? And that 24% tax bracket goes all the way up to about $340,000. So you could experience, taxable income. That means you could convert up to the top of the the 24% tax bracket up to $340,100 or so, and stay in the 24% tax bracket. And I get the feeling, Beau, that when 2030 rolls around, we'll look back at that 22 and 24% tax bracket and say that was a good deal of historic proportions. By the way, the 22 becomes a 25 in 2026, and the 24 becomes a 28. So if you take advantage of the full 24% tax bracket today, it's still better than the future equivalent of the 22% tax bracket.
And what do you say, David? I know you've had thousands of these conversations at this point. What do you say to somebody that it's just hard to get their head around paying that tax bill this year?
Yeah, usually when they have a hard time preemptively paying that tax, when I say preemptively paying it before the IRS requires it of you, most people just, they let this money ride until the point in time when the IRS forces them to take the money out, and then they have no control on the matter. So if they don't want to preemptively pay the tax, that tells me they're not really convinced the tax rates down the road are likely to be higher than they are today. They may want to check out my documentary where I crisscross the country interviewing all of the most important experts in the nation about the national debt as it relates to the future of tax rates. Listen to what the experts have to say. The experts that know much more about this than Beau and I do. They've been studying this stuff for a very long time. Former Comptroller General of the U.S. government, David Walker, they've looked at it, they've studied it. They say tax rates have to double or we go broke as a nation. And so if you don't want to preemptively pay that tax, you probably haven't studied this long enough. And I think that when you can listen to what the experts are having to say, you may just change your tune.
No, I got it. So it might be just another round of education at that point. So we say, okay, it makes sense. I got some levels I can maybe do some conversions or funding up to. What do those tools look like? I know you have. I know there's limited amounts, but what would you recommend from that next step? Says, okay, well, how do we do this, and what do we? I know what people say. What do we invest in, but what do we use?
Yeah, so there's two ways I would look at this, Beau. I would say, okay, what are the buckets of money that we can contribute to, and what are the buckets of money that we can shift to? So I would make sure that not a year goes by where you're not fully funding your Roth IRA. I would say that if you have the ability to fund your Roth 401k, I mean, you can do $27,000 per year. Your spouse can do $27,000 per year if you're over age 50. There's something that I talk about in chapter 5 of my book, The Power of Xero, the LIRP, which is basically a maximum funded life insurance retirement plan that's got a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. A lot of baby boomers are looking at that as a way to solve the long-term care dilemma. If you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you hope you never have to use. And then in terms of shifting money, if you got too much money in your 401k or IRA, and most people do, I would say start to reposition that money systematically to the tax-free bucket by way of a Roth conversion. The Roth conversion has no limits on how much you can do each and every year. There's no income limitation. So the rule of thumb here, Beau, is you shift the money slowly enough that you don't rise into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn, but you do it quickly enough that you get all the heavy lifting done before tax rates go up for good. So there's a lot of different ways and nooks and crannies in the IRS tax code that we should take advantage of, and they all have unique attributes that make them worth taking a look at.
And one of the things I love about the message you've shared over these years, David, is that this is what I find in this country is most people approach approach their retirement or their financial life very reactively. I'm getting a lot of calls after things have happened. Mm-hmm. After a spouse has died, after the big tax bills come due, after there's been a problem. And what you're out here being a proponent of from my perspective is let's proactively take action items to intentionally put ourselves in a better position with this stuff. Because if not, I love the way you said that. If you don't do it, it's going to happen to you, especially with the taxes.
Yeah, one of the analogies, Beau, that I like to use is of a tax freight train. Mm-hmm. If you're standing on the tracks, you see that freight train off in the distance. You can sort of time roughly when it's going to get there. The idea is that you want to get your 401k and IRA systematically repositioned off the train tracks before that tax freight train comes. And so, the great thing about this is there's not a lot of guesswork here. We know exactly, for tax rates to go up in 2026, all Congress has to do is nothing. And Beau, Congress is pretty good at doing nothing. So we know that tax rate train is coming. We know precisely when it's going to get here, and we know that we have 4 years during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And guess what? If we don't believe that tax rates are going up and we procrastinate until next year and we sort of figure out next year that, hey, now I have this epiphany, tax rates are going up. Now you only got 3 years and you got a narrow window within which to get the money shifted, and you'll have to shift more in shorter amount of time, which increases the likelihood you could pop up into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn. So Every year matters. Take advantage of tax rates while they're historically low.
And the other issue that we run into by being reactive or passive with this, all you're doing is making the problem bigger. When we're because 8, 9, 10, 11 years, that bucket of money is going to double, and you just have a bigger problem to deal with then.
And I'll tell you what, Congress is also taking the exact same approach. I mean, they need to be doing things today to permanently solve Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And what are they doing in the meantime? They're just borrowing money that they don't have. And so what's happening is every year that they don't fix the problem means the fix on the back end is going to be that much more severe, that much more draconian. Tax rates are going to have to rise even higher. So there's two that can play this game. We're playing this game by not preemptively paying the taxes on our investments. And the federal government is playing this game by not solving the problem and by kicking the can down the road.
Well, David, I want to thank you again for sharing the problem, because I like it when it's not just me sometimes when a third party comes in the picture and says something and says it with authority, I think people will pay attention a little closer. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing your message. Any proactive parting words for those people planning? They're in this window, the window, and they're right in the middle of this. Any proactive last kind of final thoughts on this?
Well, if you're on the fence as to whether you believe that tax rates are going up, you can read my book, The Power of Xero. I lay out all the evidence. I do it on my YouTube channel, The Power of Xero. Start looking at the evidence, seeing what the experts have to say, because if you wait a year to become convinced of the math behind the problem, then the window within which to solve the problem becomes even more narrow. So try to figure this out today. Don't kick the can down the road. Don't procrastinate. And if you do come to the realization, like I have, and as you have, Beau, that tax rates in the near future are going to be higher than they are today, then start putting a plan in place today to solve the problem.
That's it. And if you're concerned about taxes, that's the comment I get almost every encounter I'm involved in, then let's do something about it. All right. Let's come up with a proactive plan to do something about it. And to David's point, check out his books. They've been very impactful for me, and I've shared them a lot. And also the YouTube channel, Power of Xero. I know he's putting out content there. So, hey, David, thanks again for being part of the trusted brain trust here on the Retirement Resource, and love when you stop by and share with us.
Always good to be with you, Beau. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Fantastic. Wow.
How about that? Good stuff.
That's some incredible information.
I promised he'd shoot you right between the eyes with the truth there. So there you go. What are we going to do about it? A lot of
calculators coming out after this one. A lot of elbowing and spouses saying, you got to watch this. We need to have a discussion. So I think it's just fantastic. Excellent. Well, we are coming up to a fun part of our show here that we like to call the best and worst. So Beau, you ready?
All right, let's do this. So the best and worst, this is a segment where I either want us to be able to talk about a topic or have you, rich lifers, listeners, members of the show, share with us stories that you've experienced. What are the good things that have happened? Great retirement stories. Share the wins. Encourage us, give us something to shoot for, and at the same time share the lessons, what maybe we didn't do right, or maybe that other people can learn from. So that's kind of the point of this segment. And one of the things I wanted to talk about here, Amy, I was thinking about that comes up is retiring too soon, and sometimes this can be a loser. I mean, this can be a misstep in retirement. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about, I see people groaning here watching. I want everybody to retire as early as they can, financially healthy, physically healthy, with peace of mind. And if you have that strategy and mathematical certainty, retire earlier. But what I'm talking about is maybe we didn't, let's be real. Not everybody saved as much as they wanted to. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's in the position they want to be in. And if we retire earlier, a couple of things happen. One, we're increasing the number of years we have to finance in retirement. So if I retire 2 years sooner, I've got to fund 2 more years of retirement without my income coming in. Right. That's the second piece. I have 2 less years of income. and I have 2 less years to save, because if I'm working in this example an additional 2-3 years, I could be saving, maxing out my 401k, putting myself in a stronger position. And then, another one for those of you kind of on that bridge approaching 65, if I retire at 63 versus 65, I'm going to have to cover in that gap medical insurance, which right now could be very substantially expensive to budget, and we don't want to be caught by surprise. So again, what we want to do is mathematically make sure that our exit point makes sense, because one of the harder things and sometimes the answer is part-time. Maybe you don't have to keep working your career, but maybe you transition part-time for 2 or 3 years, and that smooths out the strategy. So I think that's the key, is just, if you're not feeling strong, let's do some more modeling, some more math, because one of the hardest things I've seen people try to do is leave the workforce. Say you leave the workforce at this level that you've worked up to over 30 years, you leave and then you try to go back in. It's surprising how hard, and sometimes very unlikely, to get back in anywhere near the range you had left at. Level. So I think that's the thing to think about, is what is the benefits and pros and cons of retiring early, or maybe delaying retirement. Could be part-time work. And it goes back to the theme of this whole show that we started with, is your specific, everybody has different puzzle pieces. You've got different, some of you have pensions. Some of you want to retire at 62. Some of you want to retire at 72. So you have different assets. Some of you have $15,000 of expenses. Some of you have $3,000 of monthly expenses.
Right.
All those puzzle pieces come together to create, do I have a healthy strategy that is financially viable for me to retire? I think if you can confidently, with a resounding yes, answer that question in the positive, then by all means go for it. But if not, let's make sure we're not just hoping everything turns out okay, because that's a retirement strategy that I've seen can come back and bite us in the long run.
Wow. And if all else fails, make sure you have the right advisors around you. If you're not sure, get the advisors, get the help, reach out to Beau, have somebody take a look and say, help me take a second look at this and just make sure, because it's a huge decision.
Well,
there's three happens.
You're right, Amy. And there's 3 things I know where you need to be to actually retire and pull that trigger. Is, if you can answer yes to these 3 things, do I have a retirement strategy specific to me and my household? 2, do I understand it? Do I understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, why it's set up the way it is? And 3, do I feel confident moving forward into retirement? If we can say yes to those 3 things, you're usually in a good position. The reason I spend some time on this conversation is a lot of people don't go into retirement with those 3 yeses or the high level of confidence. It's just kind of like, I hope it works out okay.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll adjust if we have to. And sometimes, again, things outside of our control might not be so friendly. So that's my best and worst for today.
I love it. Well, speaking of advisors, we've got a question here for you today with the Ask Beau section.
All right.
Now is the time for Ask Beau, where he answers your questions. Remember to send your questions to askbeau.com.
So we had a question come in this week, Beau, and it is, what is the full Social Security retirement age?
Oh, full Social Security retirement age. So what you're referring to there is what would be called your primary insurance amount, PIA. Well, it's a couple definitions. Your primary insurance amount is the dollar amount you're eligible for your Social Security benefit at your full retirement age. And that's based on your earnings history. Okay. Now, what your full retirement age is going to be based on the year you were born. And let me pull this chart up here. For everybody, for your parents, for a lot of your parents, full retirement age since 1935 to more recently was 65 years old. But for most people watching this show, full retirement age is going to be somewhere in the range of 66 to 67. And if I look at it, the big band now is those of you born between 1943 and 1954, your full retirement age is going to be your 66th birthday. And 1955, 66 and 2 months. So what's going to happen is you're going to go up 2 months in full retirement age every year after 1954. So 1955, 66 and 2 months, 1956, 66 and 4 months, and so on until those of us born 1960 and later, your full retirement age would be 67 years old. And remember, that just means the age that you're eligible for 100% of your Social Security benefit. So that's your full retirement age. And if you look up Social Security full retirement age chart or something, you can kind of see that graph. But just remember, 1943 to 1954, that's a big band of people that's 66 even. And every year after that is 2-month increments going up till 1960 and later is going to be 67 years old for full retirement age. So that is your full retirement age, and that should match up to what you see on your Social Security statements. And of course, if you're in a household and with a couple, you could have somebody with one at 66 and one at 66 and 8 months. It just depends on the age of the individuals.
Wow. Some incredible information today. What a show.
It was a good show. I always get excited when I hear David talk, because it's just, hey, it motivates me to want to do more work, to get further ahead, to get ahead of this. How did he phrase it, Amy? The tax train?
Yes.
Ahead of the tax, the tax train that's coming, or to get some of these assets off the tax train, right?
Yes.
Before it comes off the rails. So great show. And as always, for those of you watching, let me know comments, thoughts. What are the things you want to learn more about? What guests do you want us to have on the show? What conversations do you want us to have here on the Retirement Resource? And Amy, thanks so much. Had a really good time today.
All right. We're excited and look forward to what we've got next week too. You don't want to miss it.
That's right. See you next week. Same time, same place, right here on the Retirement Resource.